righty. Okay, so we went for this last class, but I did want to ask you questions, okay, about sexuality, okay. Sometimes for chapter 4, please jump in there. Sometimes being a Tom and D is preferable than heterosexuality. So in Thailand, it is sometimes better to be a Tom and D than heterosexuality. And so that's kind of a different concept. And again, there's lots of different types of sexualities. You can be a woman, gender queer, a man for gender identity. Again, there's actually way more gender identities. I think Facebook has over 300 sexualities and gender identities. And so again, this is only a few. And of course, if we go to global, I'm sure we'd have, much more gender identities. Another way to look at yourself is gender expression. Do you wear female expressing clothes? And then so some people would say you express or you perform femininity, right? Now, another way to look at gender expression is androgynous. Do you wear clothes that's males and females combined? And so some people would actually say this is androgynous gender expression, right? And then of course there's masculine, okay? Now the caveat here is that it's mostly, this is a kind of look at it. And of course, if you go around the world, there's way more different gender expressions. And of course, particularly if you go to India, hijras are not men or women. And so they have their own gender expression, right? And again, Toms and Ds in Thailand, they are same-sex females who have physical relations with each other, but they do not identify, as lesbians, okay? Now, in terms of biological sex, we know that there are female hormones and chromosomes, but we also know that some people are born intersex, and that is not actually a super small percentage. There's actually lots of babies that are born every year that you just don't know their sex, right? And this is something that's global. So in other countries, you can actually designate an X when you're born, okay? And of course, there's a male. But again, this is a huge continuum. Think about yourself. Maybe some cultures believe that you have both sexes, right? Such as like, I'm thinking of American Indian tribes where two spirits, right? And also hijras, neither sex, right? And that's part of the religion. And also there's also sexual orientation. Again, there's many different sexual orientations. There's heterosexual, bisexual, homosexual, but again, there's asexual, not having sexuality. And again, there's hundreds of sexual orientations that we can't go through, okay? There's too many, okay? All right, and so again, something to think about in terms of how you express yourself, okay? Now we talked about Toms and Ds. The relationships are not considered adultery. So if you're a man and you're married to a D, let's say, in Thailand, and the D which is a female expressing woman who has intercourse with another woman, she can have an affair with, or not affair, a relationship with a Tom, and it's not considered adultery. Now, question. Arturo, Jonathan, what do you think of this?
I think it's okay.
Okay. Yeah, in Thailand, it's not considered adultery. Jonathan?
I mean, like, I don't really see a problem with it. I mean, in Thailand, if that's like what they're used to, if that's,
Yep,
what their culture accepts, then I really don't see anything wrong with it.
Okay, well, definitely it's not considered adultery, okay? So again, and in fact, Jonathan, if you have an extra hand to help out with the kids, let's say your wife is a D and she has a Tom, that's an extra person that takes care of your children, right? So again, it's not considered adultery. Cultures are different. All right, so women are perceived as sexually passive, and so that's why this whole Toms and Ds thing is not transgressive in Thai culture. Okay. For instance, if you're a woman, it's considered common and sometimes to be asexual and harmless if you have female friendships, right? And also, you cannot get AIDS from another woman. And so this text says, I'm not sure if that's true. Okay. And so again, really want to emphasize that Dees are very much pushed into marrying a male later, right? And I talked about last class, the reason is in Asian culture, you could argue that it's homophobia, but also you could, and maybe it is, or maybe it isn't, but one really has to understand the culture of Asia. They do not have Social Security. So once again, they do not have Social Security. So what that means is when you are elderly, there's no one to help you. The government will not give you money. So who is gonna help you survive, everyone? Arturo, who's gonna help you survive if you're an elderly person? It's gotta be your who?
Family.
Yes, it has to be your family. So that's why people push you to get married, because you have kids and those kids will take care of you. And so again, something to think about in terms of Tom and Dee relationships and how they push them to get married and have kids, okay? Now, it's okay for younger women to be Toms and Dees, but not for older, because they have to start a family, right? We talked about just earlier. All right, so we talked about Thai norms and gender. Again, this PowerPoint is already up in our class. You can read it, okay? Again, this is already, we talked about last class, but there's like dangers to being heterosexual, right? It can be risky. It could be, you can be raped by a male. You can be perceived as promiscuous. But if you're with another woman, it's not as considered as transgressive, okay? And again, I want you to read this after class. This is uploaded, so feel free to go through that, okay? Now, chapter 5 says that Toms and Dees are relatively free. That is true. I've been to Thailand a couple times. It's very much, they do not get what you would get in some parts of the United States, like looks or stares or something. It's not a restricting role. And they have rules, and let's talk about the rules, okay? Again, in Thai society, it's more okay to be a female homosexual or same-sex relationship versus males. I think that would be the case in the United States as well, okay? All right, so this is something that we talked about in chapter 5, okay? Toms have masculine privileges. Toms are expected to perform, quote unquote, for Dees while being physically untouched by Dees. And this is something that is very unusual to maybe Western eyes. What do I mean by untouched? What do I mean by, so in Tom relationship and D relationship, same-sex female relationship, the Tom pays for everything. They must support the D. The D pays for nothing, okay? And the Tom pays for it all. But also in the sexual realm, the Tom does everything for the D, does not get touched by the D, and the D receives all the physical touching, okay? What do you guys think about this?
Doesn't seem quite fair.
It doesn't seem quite fair, okay? Well, yeah, Arturo, it's their culture. It's not 50-50.
Oh yeah, there you yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult to be a Tom in a sense, Arturo. I mean, they gotta do everything.
Yeah, it's like they'll probably feel unappreciated.
Yeah, and actually that's true. Some of the Toms interviewed feel like they're being used.
Oh yeah, there you go.
But that is their culture. Jonathan, Arwa, what do you think? What do you guys think of this concept? Because the Tom has to do everything, but kind of get nothing in return. I don't know. Jonathan, what do you think? I mean, do they get something back?
I feel like, honestly, it doesn't surprise me because some cultures, they have same thing, like for wife and husband, like mostly the husband pays everything. I think Asian have the same thing too.
Oh, wow. Okay. But Arwa, would you say that there is this like physical barrier? Because it says here that in the book, Arwa, it says that the Tom cannot be physically touched. Only can give, touching. So that seems unequal. Arwa, what do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's not equal.
Yeah. So Arwa, remember we're talking about Toms and Dees. These are kind of relatively, not I won't say entitled. I want to say privileged, Western-based women who live in Bangkok, which is the wealthy city, right? But Thailand is a huge country with millions and millions and millions of people that don't live in the city, and so they have their own sexual identity. And they actually don't follow these norms of Toms and Ds. They don't acknowledge Toms and D identity, right? It's a specific identity within Bangkok. All right. So again, this is very unusual and I think to Western eyes, but actually it's normative, Arturo, the norm in Thailand, particularly for Tom and Ts. All right. Again, I really want you guys to push you guys to read Judith Butler's work on hegemony and performance of identity. I highly recommend you take a class with women's studies. Okay. All right. And again, there are power relationships. Hegemony means power, right, that you can't see. Okay. And so how does this affect Tom and D relationships and power relationships? So class, if you know that a Tom has to support fully a D, and fully support or engage in female same-sex relationship but not being touched, how does that affect the power relationships?
I think it really boils down to, I guess, a couple of things. Since Toms are expected to, be a provider of sorts to pay for everything, and these are meant to be simply, recipients, kind of almost objects in that sense. You could argue that, Toms have, kind of the more visual, like de facto power, that they're more taking the more active role.
Yes.
However, that's entirely dependent upon the D, accepting the Tom and approving of the Tom, and also kind of telling the Tom what it is to buy. What, like, I want this, I need you to take care of this, and you need to do X, Y, and Z. So while Toms are more active, they also bear much more responsibility and are more feel much a larger obligation in the relationship than the D does. So it's a very much imbalanced relationship.
So yes, William, I mean, it's very expensive to be a Tom. You're talking, you have to probably buy the makeup for the D, you have to buy the clothes for the D, you have to pay for the meals of the D. I mean, that's a intense sort of asymmetry kind of relationship. But again, that's what they believe as normative and accepted. So,
I think, I'm sorry, I'm also just a little bit slightly confused and at risk of delving in too deep into like gritty details. I think I'm not quite sure exactly what qualifies as being touched in this regard, because does it mean literal touching, like, hands in your pockets type thing, or is it in terms of like kind of a more of a euphemism, because at the same time, these very sexual relationships, just in terms of what's actually happening, are not considered to be sexual simply because there's not a man involved. So I'm not quite sure exactly how they quantify touching in this regard as well.
So William, you kind of hit it. You always do this. You hit the nail on I guess the hammer on the nail. What the author also, how she writes it in the chapter is also dancing around it. But apparently, according to her argument, Megan Sinnott, only the female D receives pleasure and touching. So when I was reading it, I was like, am I taking this literally? But that's what she wrote, that the female is the recipient of pleasure. I'm talking about the D.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the D.
In terms of sexual realm, but the Tom is not the recipient of pleasure. So I only can take it from what she wrote. William, what do you think? Because that's what she wrote. She said the one touches, one does not touch, one just receives pleasure. So
Well,
the other one does not receive pleasure.
I don't know exactly what that means, because you could have receiving in the literal sense, you know, where one is more passive, the other is taking the active role. You can have the idea of, doms and subs, tops and bottoms. It's all fairly vague. It's like when you have, oh, I know them in the biblical sense type thing, where or as opposed to I just know them. That seems overtly vague and very poorly defined. So it's very difficult to define these relationships, because nothing's explicit. And
Yes.
I understand it's an uncomfortable topic, but when you're trying to talk about, an uncomfortable thing, or, a thing where that deals with, human sexuality, you're going to have to talk about uncomfortable things at times. So I'm honestly a little bit confused about some aspects of these relationships.
Yeah. And William, think about it. They're Asian. And
yeah, that's the other problem. There's a whole lot of tension and nervousness, and oh, I can't talk about this. It's inappropriate. I don't want to make grandma mad.
Yeah. So I think that's some aspect we got to think about is it's not like we're not Northern European where they're just very explicit and will tell us, what's going on in the sexual realm. Asians don't talk about their sex life like that, right? It's culturally not normative, I would say, right? Would you agree?
Yeah,
so
very repressed.
Yeah, so it's difficult that, I'm sure this author was like, so what are you doing? I mean, how is she going to ask, what are you doing in the bedroom, Yeah,
because obviously, because otherwise it sounds seriously just like the Dees are being exploited. Not the Dees, the Toms are being exploited by the Dees, because it seems like there is absolutely nothing in this relationship for the Tom. They're being financially and sexually exploited, and so obviously that can't really be the case.
But William, is that our American eyes? If they agree to that and they think it's normative, is that our American eyes putting on sort of judgment? Or
I would argue that just because something has been normalized within a culture, that it doesn't cease to be exploitation or abuse to a degree. There are plenty of things in American culture, in American cultures, my cultural background from Hawaii or from Southern California or from Texas, where it was considered culturally acceptable because I was a guy. But if I were to try to kind of abstract or pull back from my own cultural biases, no, I was in I was on the receiving end of an abusive relationship, but no one said anything because I was the guy. And so it was culturally normalized, where if you were to watch, turn on any American sitcom, and you have the husband that comes home and is berated by the wife for not being good enough or something like that, and it's played up for laughs. But if you were to turn on Hallmark or FX or something, and it's a drama, and reverse the gender roles, and where the wife's being berated by the husband, keep all the dialogue the same, it would be a drama or a tragedy.
That's a very good point, William. That's a very good point. Just how some males are perceived, right? They that they cannot be victims or they cannot be exploited. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
All right, guys. And so again, I'm not going to put judgment on this. This is how they, and Megan Sina writes about it. A Tom has certain roles and a D has certain roles. Okay. Now, something else that we talked about earlier is Toms are expected to financially support the Ds. So it's expensive to be a Tom, right? Because you got to pay for everything, in terms of meals and clothing and jewelry, all these things. You're supposed to take that. And again, William, Toms complain that they're being taken advantage of by Ds, right? They do say that, okay? And then, but Arturo, Jonathan, Arwa, look at number 3. A Tom cannot be supported by a D. It's considered, quote, socially wrong, right? So that is their culture, that it cannot be the other way, okay? So again, I could think about maybe the U.S. culture. Oh, what does it say when males are housewives or house husbands, right? Sometimes society is very not as accepting as a housewife, as a house husband, right? So you see this concept here, a Tom cannot be accepted or supported by a D, okay? Now, I want to deep dive this as well, okay? So William, think about this. A Tom cannot wear a skirt, okay? In their Tom and D, so it's not just the finances, also the physical realm, right? And also the social realm, right? You see the constriction, but even their clothes is constricted. A Tom cannot wear a skirt. Only a D can wear a skirt. So what do you guys think about this? There's actually kind of a uniform. Arwa, William, Jonathan, Arturo, what do you think about this?
That is a very much obviously a holdover from decades or just going past, where you have gendered clothing, and generally the people making the rules in the workplace are the guys that founded the company, 100 years ago, and they want to maintain some sense of tradition or harken back to some sense of gendered sense of professionalism.
Yeah, but William, what if you're a Tom and you want to wear a skirt?
Then your gender identity or your sexual identity is going to be oppressed at the workplace.
Yeah, so it's sometimes I would think a Tom might want to wear a skirt, but in their the
Oh, I'm
confines.
sorry, I got that totally mixed up. I thought you were saying, Justin, that they were forced to wear a skirt in the workplace but did not want to.
Oh, no. In this case, so so Toms cannot wear skirts, but in Thai culture, sometimes you have to wear a skirt to work, right? There's a gender norm for Thai culture, but D's actually are complaining that Tom should never wear a skirt, right? So because right, if a Tom wears a skirt, then that Tom becomes a D, right? It kind of like changes their expression, right?
Mm-hmm.
So William, what do you think of this? Like, it puts the Tom in a very tight situation. In Thai society, they have to wear a skirt sometimes at work, but these don't think it's good for a Tom to wear a skirt. Do you see how they're being pushed two ways?
Yeah, it's a catch-22, and it's wrong for anyone, whether it's your workplace or your partner, to impose on your gender expression or identity.
Yeah, definitely. But you see that it's not easy, even though one could argue, William, that maybe Thailand is probably one of the most safe and accepted places to be a same-sex female couple. But you see that there's a lot of rules.
Yes, it's very regimented.
Yeah. So, okay.
But that's probably just an artifact of, gender norms going back quite a while.
Definitely. So again, just like we have GLAAD, which is I think the Gay and Lesbian Advocacy. I don't know what the AAD means, but it's a advocacy group in LA for different sexuality groups in Thailand. And again, I'm not going to go over too much. There are two big same-sex Tom and D community organizations, and it's Energy and Lesla. Okay, Energy is an older organization, right? And they have actually kind of a historical population of more a women's rights kind of members, right? But the new group, right? So the Energy is like an old. I hate to use the word lesbians because again, they specifically say that they're not lesbians, right? So, but it has over 700 members. They have newsletters. It talks about being in a same-sex relationship. Obviously, they are somehow connected to the international LGBT movement, right? So that's something to think about, okay? But the newer one, right, which is more internet-based, okay? And again, I want you to read this after class. It's Lesla, which is kind of like an internet-based, more younger, more wider kind of, and they're not activists, right? They're just, fun-loving, same-sex female couples, okay? So it's sort of like some people are members of both. So one is like more established and one is more open. It's like internet-based and anyone can join, and maybe they're not woman activists, right? Energy is a lot of the members are female activists from like, for decades, right? This is more kind of like, I hate to use the word, but Gen X, millennials, right? Maybe Thai same-sex couples that, maybe don't want to do the activism. So again, that's the two main topics, and I'm gonna stop. And that will be today's 456. Let me stop this.